We are here for this. My name is Dr. Dilina Nawarathne. I'm a co-founder and the type director at Moniac. That's a Sinhala Tamil Latin or Sinhala Tamil English typeface design studio. We design fonts, we make multilingual typography, and this year is our 10th year anniversary, and we are very happy and grateful to be curating these 2-day events on designing a nation. Ooh, it sounds big, but you know, we are talking about serious things, but we are not taking ourselves too seriously. So that's the vibe we are going for in these talks. These are dialogues, so we're gonna just talk about stuff. It will be very informal, and we had just had the first panel a while ago about South Asian design and South Asian identities in business, and we are building a little narrative that will conclude tomorrow evening with the last panel about what would the unified Lankan identity look like. So we are going to go into the second panel, new ways of design beyond the Western textbook. So since I'm curating, I'm setting a little nimitta or the setup for each of these panels, and this is something that I've been thinking about when I started as a typeface designer, graphic designer. These are all the different terminology and disciplines that we found out, I learned about. Typography, type design, lettering, calligraphy, everything to do with letters. I had a deep interest in letter forms, but as a typeface designer, I've been researching and working and thinking about all these things. But when I'm asked to define myself constantly on my LinkedIn bio and Instagram bio and to define what I am doing, I go into this crisis. Then we have this beautiful word in Sinhala, akuru. I feel like everything I do is with akuru, so can we make a new word and just be done with it? I'm doing akurography. And the second nimitta comes from my deep sort of interest in open source culture and copyleft culture. This is the copyleft symbol. It's a play on the copyright idea, using copyleft like open source licenses, sharing everything under so everybody can access them freely. So I've been advocating for this. But this is again coming from the Western world, and we have been giving out everything that we do for free, but so we haven't been making a lot of money, that we need to really sustain our work. So instead of going to all these licenses, can we look at what we have been doing here? We have been doing Dansala for all these times. We raise money, we feed everybody, we have fun. So that's my nimitta for the new ways of design. We have an exciting lineup of panelists. I'm going to hand over to Chaturangi, who's going to run this dialogue, and she will introduce. She's a lecturer and a designer. She's a lecturer at the Department of Integrated Design at University of Moratuwa, and she'll explain the format that we're going for and everything else. Here to Chaturangi.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Thank you for having us. So this design dialogue is called New Ways of Design. Patrick is very excited about the topic. He came up with it. He changed it from the original because he wanted it to be New Ways of Design. And I think all of the panelists in this panel are very excited about the topic as well and talking about new ways of design. We have Sanskar joining us. Thank you. We were waiting for our last panelist, but he's here. So it's going to be a very interesting dialogue and a conversation. So we're going to start off. We have 3 panelists here today. Sanskar from India, I think he was here in the morning. I heard a lot about your speech. It was amazing, it seems. We have Dilina, who is also here in the morning as well. And we have Sophia. We are so excited to have you here with us as well. So it's certainly going to be a very exciting discussion on new ways of design, and this is also titled Beyond the Western Textbook. So when it comes to design, I mean, we as educators or researchers or designers, when it comes to design, there is so many ways that design is taught. There's so many ways that design is understood across our universities or workplaces or wherever, right? I mean, when we look at the books that we read, to the case studies that we might analyze, or the design processes that we follow, or the design frameworks that we actually take and try to discuss with our students. There is a lot of Western thought into it, and it comes from a lot of Western textbooks. And today's dialogue, which is titled New Ways of Design, beyond the Western textbook, we are here to ask some important questions as to, does design actually belong to somewhere, or is it something that is rooted in different cultures across different histories? Whether it's rooted from people, whether, is it from the making and the living that we understand and discuss design in so many different ways. So these are some of the questions that we are trying to explore today in this design dialogue, and to really understand what happens beyond the Western textbook that we initially talked about, right? So we hope to bring some of our own stories, some of our own materials, and some of our own ways of looking into design. So before we start, I want to also reflect on one of the projects that I recently concluded with my students at the level 2 of the Department of Integrated Design at University of Moratuwa. So we started off by looking at the coconut tree, right? And so the students really did so much of experimentation with the coconut itself. So all parts of the tree, they looked at the shell, they looked at the leaves, the palm, so much of it, right? And they did experiment a lot with it in terms of how humans interact with it, how cultures, interact with it, our histories with, the coconut. There's so much of stories that is running behind centuries that is associated with the coconut tree. So they mapped all of these rituals, they mapped all of these histories, they experimented with the materials, they looked at heritage crafts, healing systems that's associated with Ayurveda. So these are all of the generational practices that's associated with the coconut, right? We also went and met with different craft communities, and there were so many stories that we learned from these people. How they get the materials, the hardships, how much they value what they do, and the pride that they had in what they created. So we went and chatted with them. We talked about their past. So many conversations that actually came up. And this lady was actually telling us a story about how the elephants, come into their gardens now and take off all the coconuts, the coconut trees, and I think Dilina will be better suited to talk about human-elephant conflict and what our students are actually doing with that also. But amidst all of these, discussions, there were a lot of other, material qualities that we talked about. So these designs that the students later on did were actually rooted very much in not just the material itself, not just what we learn as design in frameworks, but what was also rooted in the histories and the cultures and how these people actually make it part of their lifestyle, right? So our students actually interacted with all of these communities, with the culture, with the history, with the roots of it, in terms of understanding and trying to bring design and trying to understand new ways of design for all of this. So they later on also discussed about, the different market aspects of it, how we can blend it into the new world, the modern world. And they, interacted with different materials, coming up with new materials, rooted in different histories and also the different cultures, and, coming up with new things. Of course, some of these things didn't work well, but, that was also part of the process, right? And so these are some of the experiments that the students did. These are some of the products, the prototypes that they came up with. Interestingly, this earlier picture was of a heel pole cutter. I think that's also from our traditions, from our grandparents and great-grandparents, how the little ones are bathed, right? And then how do we bring it to a new culture, and how do we bring it to today's society in terms of design? So I think what I want to see through these few images is how design is, not just to be looked at in one single way, but there are so many multiple ways, cultures, histories, roots coming together to talk about design. So I think in that sense, we're talking about new ways of design. We're going to start off with Sanskar, who is here from India. When I look at your work, when I saw the pictures that you had sent, your work through the homework studio, Sanskar's practice feels very, very alive. It feels very, very grounded. And I think we'd first of all love to hear about how his experiences across different illustrations that he has done, the different immersive spatial installations that has done, and coming through to that into our discussion of new ways of design. Sanskar, do you want to just jump right in? Yes?
Hey guys, I'm Sanskar. I'm an illustrator designer based in Bombay. I studied art in a very, the most common way possible in Bombay, which was going to a government college and learning fine art. Also to know that fine art exists, you had to be in a family which is like a typical middle class Maharashtrian family, which is the part that I come from in India. A lot of exposure to doing sets or public art projects in the festival sector, in the sense that I used to design festival mandaps or festival decorations when I was in college, because that's where you see art for the first time as a part of culture. And doing that, I started working with the film city in Bombay, because Bombay and Bollywood is pretty. It goes hand in hand, and also gives you an opportunity to put out your work at that time. From there I traveled to advertising, where I started learning how art can actually make an impact in the industry and what the industry standards are. I also learned a lot of vocabulary which was not only artist dictionary vocabulary. So words like client servicing, management, timelines, and just deliverables, to the point where it became a little frustrating for me, and I started my own practice and started doing something that I was comfortable doing, which was public art. These are some murals that I've done for the folks at Pepsi. They also have Mountain Dew. This particular mural is in Nepal. Can we go to this? It says Dar ko agadi jeet cha, which literally means Dar ke aage jeet hai in Hindi, which we were very we were aware of. But then we started seeing basically wanted to do sort of a collaboration with a space which is Asia's top bungee jumping spot and world's second top for bungee jumping spots. And they sort of revamped the space with Multidisciplinary branding and wanted us to do murals in that space. Again, there was a brief given to me, which is why I could think in that fashion and come up with an illustration for it and eventually paint a mural. This is a skate park that I designed in Bombay. It was a concrete park with different shaped wheels and a lot of different canvases that I could identify. And I come from a city where finding walls is very difficult. Real estate costs a lot, and it's been taken over by advertising or Bollywood, political communications, all different. If you are not into these four things, you can't become a space designer. So I was struggling to be a space designer in a place that doesn't have space. And I still want to do that, because larger than life artworks made me happier, made an impact per se. It was a very big canvas, so I had to put in a lot of different styles together and just separated them as different blocks. We also got funded for the project by a gaming company which was designing a VR skateboarding app. So this became like a map in the game. So we actually shot the space with all those 3D cameras, and then this became like a map setting which people can sit at in the bedrooms and sort of skate. Yeah, that's the Adidas flagship store it's called Adidas Halo store. It's the first store in Asia, in Delhi, and the first Halo store in Asia. And again, they wanted something Adidas, but they didn't want to give us any rights of their own artwork, so we had to design something from our experiences of what the brand is. This is
a comedy club or a theatre in Kochi. There was this long boat lying there, nothing was done about it, so we decided to paint it and put chairs and bar stools around it to make it relaxable. Okay, this is, I realized when I was just designing for spaces and I was crying about not having the spaces, it came an opportunity which was festival design, where we used to design spaces that would later get dismantled. So there was obviously a lot of work coming in and more opportunities, newer briefs, and kind of people visiting the shows would change. So we won't have, like, I won't have like a style that people remember me for, like which is what I'm also fighting towards, or like moving towards. This is for Breezer, where we converted a small, say, 1,500 square feet space into a lounge, an open lounge. And we got a lot of street furniture, innovative bars, and gamified the entire space. I mean, like, no one likes to have a Breezer, so we had to make people drink Breezer. That was the brief given by the brand. And then we had to sort of make games that the gratification becomes a bottle of wine. You have to actually get interested in the game to win a Breezer, which is anyways a difficult task to do. Yeah, and it all came from this very idea of when we go for these fun fairs and you see people ring toss something onto a soap, they get a soap, and a teddy bear, they get a teddy bear. So we just put a lot of traffic cones in the previous slide. A lot of traffic cones and the Breezer bottles. So if you put a ring in the Breezer bottle, you get 3 rings. If you put one ring in the Breezer bottle, you get the Breezer. But if any ring goes into the traffic cones, you get disqualified. So the best thing is the first one goes, you just throw the other ones down. But again, that was another, when I used to go to fun fairs, I was like fascinated with the kind of installations or pancake installations that people would interact with. Would sit in something like a merry-go-round or just those fake small cars. I wanted to replicate those with a modern day brand. So that I was always like, very much interested in trying out different things at a fun fair. Be like, I don't want to waste my money. But so I thought of like using those ideas into a modern day project where I think a lot of people would like to do that. Like if I do it right now, all of you all will come and be like, okay, I'm going to try this, give it a shot. This other activity where we designed a very different looking canvas, numbered it, and let people come and paint by numbers. So it's also a drink and draw sort of activity that you have to not forget which number you're painting. And eventually let them paint up the pieces, which are basically we don't complete the installation, so we just create people and work on it. This is the mural I painted in Chennai in neighborhood. Again, a lot of inspiration from just going around the place, understanding the city, understanding the locality. I went wrong a lot of times. Some people also got a little offended because I used some typefaces or color schemes which were very because I was getting inspired by the streets, and the streets had all political communications. So I was, in a way, replicating political color schemes. And people were like, no, this is a party's color. And if I'm using it the other way, this is that party's color, but you have left it, so it's even more disrespectful. So I had a tough time come to a color scheme. Now the color scheme that you see is a political party in Maharashtra. That no one knows. But anyway, it worked for me. And whatever I've written is things that I felt there. The name of the piece is Malai, which means evening in Tamil, and that was the best time for me to paint it because I was painting it in May in that evening, and I felt like evenings are the best time to paint. So that's the name of the mural. But if you see, I knew the mural is going to get vandalized later by people putting paste up stickers on top of it, which is why I had the paste up texture throughout the mural. So even if it gets vandalized later, it feels like it's a part of the mural. Also, you see a big sari like being ripped from the terrace, because I knew people are going to put their own saris to dry, and again it has to feel like a public art piece. What I feel we focus on when we design public spaces, which are a little sensitive, is that you have to satisfy the subconscious of people who actually live there. Because I am not going back to the place. They shouldn't feel that some guy from Bombay came, painted something for us, and is dictating the terms that we should follow. We have complete peace. Yeah. This is what a complete peace looks like. Yeah, very random goals, very random. I saw someone play a Ludo sort of a game on the street, on the road, so I just made that. Next. Yeah, that's a piece that I designed for myself. Because I don't like to write my name on the murals. If you see any of my murals, you won't see my name on it, because I feel if I write my name, the beauty of the mural goes off. So I have to design something that fits in with different subjects. We'll come to that, but I've also painted a mural here in Navla. It's a Pepsi brand communication, but again that also doesn't have my name. This is for a basketball academy called Akansha Singh Basketball Academy. Akansha Singh was India's basketball captain for the longest time till 2015, women's team captain. Now she has her own academy, and the brief that they gave me is they want people to. She has gone through a lot of hardship, but she doesn't want people or kids to see the hardship. They want to look up to something that they're going to work towards. In India, cricket is the most celebrated sport, but like basketball is like the coolest sport ever. You see a lot of jerseys being. Even if I don't know basketball, I'll wear a basketball jersey. Or like I'll have a basketball player's sneaker that I'll be wearing, but I won't play the sport. And if you see the kids who play basketball don't play anything else. Everyone else plays different games, and then they want to, in the time pass moment, they want to play basketball. But basketball kids don't play anything else. So if someone has picked up that sport to learn, to become an athlete at such a young age, they need to see the things that inspire them, not the hardship towards it. So you see that no one is falling. We're trying to find out gestures that look cool and they get inspired to play the sport. This is a 100% painted wall, by the way. It's a brush and painted. And even the net that you see, how we have achieved that is we have made a CNC cutout, which is like a stencil on a sunboard sheet, and spray painted to it. And just mask the other part that doesn't need to be painted. That's it.
Thank you so much. I really love how you incorporate little elements from the context that you visit into your art. But we'll talk more about it in just a bit. But from Sanskar, we're going to move into Sophia, and I think it's really interesting and amazing how barefoot has been like a really powerful example of what it really means to design from our own ground, right? From color to the geometry. To a very community-centered production. Barefoot has always, I think, shown that design can grow from culture, from craft, and of course, a very deep sense of place as well. So I think drawing from that legacy of Barefoot, we are so grateful to have Sophia here today to talk about new ways of design.
Hello. I'm not sure if I'm going to actually talk about new ways of design. I feel like I'm terrible with mics, so if you can't hear me, I apologize. But I'm kind of just going to touch on very, very old traditions. And it's a method of design Barefoot's been using for the past, 60 years. And we're still here, so maybe they're good, maybe something's working. And I realize a lot of people, when they touch textile or when they interact with textile, they don't actually know where it's come from or how it came to be. And I think that's just a little bit of the process that I want to share with you guys today. Oh, there you go. Okay. So we're just going to start with raw hanks of yarn, so unbleached yarn that we get from India. And they're just about to go for a dye bath. So you see these red dye sticks. And then from there, hold on, sorry. Here they are. They're going for a little bath in stainless steel dye baths. It's hanks of yarn that get rotated by hand. And we get their color, and then they go out into the sun and dry. And after they've dried, we collect them and we wind them by hand into perns. Perns that then get put on a loom. And this act of getting yarn onto a loom is the most meticulous thing I have ever witnessed in my entire life. When you look at each single one of these individual threads, get so carefully and with so much love, just gets put onto a loom. And you can just see them. I can't imagine doing it. It's such a wonderful thing to witness. We have all these incredible people and incredible teams that help and do this every single day. They do it like it's second nature. Here we see some fabric coming through. So Barefoot uses a 2-petal loom. It's the most simplest loom you can get, and we simply do plain weave. And what plain weave is you get a warp and you get a weft. So what we focus on is we focus on how two colors kind of react with one another. And then we design, and that's some thought that's coming up there. Here are some fabrics. These are some designs you might see in our stores. And over there we've got a redda. So Barefoot was started by my grandmother Barbara. She didn't want anything to do with weaving. She loved traveling, she loved having parties, she loved drawing. She loved traveling. And a good friend of hers, a good family friend, mother, good counsel, convinced her that she was working with weavers, and she said, Barbara, they're weaving horrible cloth. They're weaving like ugly cloth. Can we bring some color into there? And that was something that my grandmother said, okay, fine, we will do. And she did it happily, and she fell in love. And she didn't abandon her artist side or artistry at all. So here we see a redda. I'll touch on what a redda is in Barefoot terms soon. And it's called Trees at Dawn. And just looking at it, you see light coming in from the right. You see the shadow of the trees to the left. You see where it darkens. And you see dawn breaking. And that's simply done with a warp and a weft. And this design would just be something you would have seen. I mean, I think you all just take a moment and meditate and just look at a sunrise or a sunset. You would just see how colors interact with one another. This is a bit about design. So we don't actually start with yarn, we start with design. And this is a design by my grandmother. She got gifted a Siamese cat, Siam Pusa, by her sister. And she just looked at this cat and she took the proportions of the cat and just started at the lower bottom right. You just see this little design coming through. And with that, she made this redda, this other bit of colorful cloth. And the way, so then I'm not going to read off the slide, but this is an original note about what a redda meant to her. And it's looking into one. You can see landscapes, you can see seascapes, you can see atmospheric jungles, birds, coral, reef fish, and endless other subjects. There is no pictorial tracery or form, but a clearly recognizable abstract presentation of the essence of a subject. And she never defined, well, we talk about red, so red, for those who don't know, is, it means cloth in Chinese. It just simply means cloth, but what it meant to her, it was, you could hang it from a pole, it could be stretched onto a frame. She often encouraged people to take this large red and wrap it around themselves. It could become a dress. You could walk on it. She would be very happy, I think, if she saw walking someone's home and it was used as a rug. She would be very happy to see it on someone's bed. I think she would be even happy to see if someone was using it to even dust off something else. Like, it was meant to be used. It shouldn't be precious. It was just something. It was precious in the sense we would love and respect cloth, but there was no restriction in what you could do with it. And this, when I think about design, or when I think about new ways of design, my mind keeps going to this poster. We have this in our shops. It's something we look at every single day. And I think, when I think about ways in which we're new, I think about sticking to an old way of making. But what is new is external things around us. We could go to a landscape and then design something, and 10 years later that landscape will shift. And we just try to be sustainable and just stay new in different ways. We have, and one thing that I love that she says is we teach skills and assert no time pressure on our hand weavers or needle women. They are not cheap substitutes for machinery. And I think that's something we need to bring back new again. Humans aren't cheap substitutes for machinery. I think humans are magical, and I think working with humans, working with people every day is such an incredible privilege. I think I think people at Bassett have, and I hope others have it too. I think just keeping some things old makes it new, in a sense. Yeah, I think that's it.
That was beautiful, Sophia. Thank you so much. I think working with people is a privilege. I think that's one of the key takeaways from your talk. We have a lot more to discuss. But before that, we're going to move into Dilina. I really like the diversity of our speakers today. Dilina is also a lecturer from the University of Murray, the Department of Integrated Design, and I think his work and his research has really been shaping how we think and talk about design today here in Sri Lanka. And from his teaching, from his research, and also to the informal chats and the gatherings that he has with research enthusiasts, has really let us explore more about how we look at design and how we teach design as well. So Dilina, I would really love to hear your thoughts on design education and research, and also in terms of how we can move beyond the Western textbook as well.
Hi, hello. I'm Dilina. So first of all, I must claim I'm not a designer. So unlike Sophia or Sanskar, I don't have things to show, but I have a small confession, reflection to do. So to begin with, I want to give you a small task. So imagine you are given the chance of giving an award for 5 best designs in the world, any time in the world. You could do either to humans, non-humans, anyone. Right? So just take a few seconds and try to come up with 5 designs that you award. Best 5 designs in the world, either human, non-human, anything. I will not ask, don't worry. Just keep it in your mind, open tab, so you'll come back to it later. Right? Huh? Okay, you can go. Yes, definitely. So, these just like 5 or 4 random picks from 100 greatest design of modern times. One of my favorites here is the corner one, the Hawaiian slippers, or in our case called the Bata or Bata, a lot of stuff before. So apparently, this Hawaiian flip-flop or the slippers are designed based on a Japanese channel called Zori channel. So, if I ask you to raise hands, how many of you tell both of them are designs? How many of you are telling this one is the only design, this one is not? How many of you tell that there is both of them are designs, but there is sort of a hierarchy, like one is better design than the other? I'm not going to ask again which one, but if you feel like there's a hierarchy? Okay. So, the Paul Under, is it a design for you? What about nature? Carpenter's nest, design? I want you to introduce to something that changed or had little bit of doubt on the way we talk about design. That is called category mistake. So this is actually by Bruno Latour, one of philosophers, sociologists. So he's talking about something called category mistake. That is when we confusing or impinging, superimposing or misunderstanding something for something else. Right? So we talked about the error of treating one kind of reality through the logics, experiences of the other logics. So I started to read about this in like 2 to 5 years back, if I'm being honest. And then I realized I started to like rethink all the things that I've been doing. So for me, I started to doubt this question. I had to start think a lot of different answers for this one. That include nature as well. So the reason I'm started pondering on this idea of category mistake was really the moment you do the category mistake, you started to ask wrong questions from wrong category. So you confuse things, different things with different other things. So for instance, when Latour was speaking about category mistake, he's take nice 2 examples. So if you try to prove that nirvana is scientifically possible, you are confusing the religious reality with scientific reality. Or if you try to ask someone, do you believe in science? Again, you are confusing scientific reality with religious reality, because science is not a matter of believing. Right? So you are confusing the 2 types of logic, 2 types of experiences. So this led me to realize that maybe I'm having a doubt, so I'm just posing the same doubt to you. We can have the dialogue at the session, right? So maybe I was confusing, impinging, thus colonizing many other realities with designs. Maybe. That is my question. So, for instance, my confession. In second year, this is me in my first year, as a designer, assuming that the craft village in Kurunagala also doing design, and me as a designer could go and do better designs or else learn from them. But now I feel like they are doing something totally different. It's a different value set, different reasoning. For instance, if we go back, if I have the ability of time traveling and go back and ask why you are doing this, they may not say the same thing that we are now thinking about the craft communities. We now see it through the design lens. But for them, it's a different reality. There are a lot of caring, relationality is there. They are sometimes producing things for the sake of caring, not to solve problems, not for the efficiency. There's a different value set. So for me, it's sort of a confession for mistaking the craft directly as or superimposing design into craft. So, and then when I started to teach design at University of Morocco, history of art and design is the most hated subject. So whenever a young lecturer comes, that is the subject you get to teach because it has a written exam as well. So I started to teach history of art and design, and this is my first slide. So I was telling also Homo erectus was doing design, but now I feel like they were not doing design. We are the one who telling after learning design that they were designing, right? So if you go back and ask Homo erectus, they did not. So at a certain stage of design history, by design I'm here talking to very political, socio-geographical term. It started to evolve from a certain era, and it started to get really spacious, very general, so we could apply it to anything, right? That's when we start, okay, stone tool is a design. Like that we started to confuse it, maybe, or try to apply it to everywhere, right? And this is again my conclusion, that is my second slide, claiming that Kingfisher is a well designed, right? Which is again, now I feel like, after learning category mistake, I was confusing the logics, two logics. I've learned design, and now I'm superimposing the reality of my design into nature. To be honest, when it comes to nature, it's agnostically big. We don't know what is happening there, right? We don't know how to explain the nature, how it happens, nothing. So we as designers, after learning design, we try to superimpose the reality of design into nature, claiming that it is design. So these are the areas that I started to feel like, okay, maybe it is not the way to do it, claiming that it is design. Or craft communities are designing. This is the doubt that I started to ask, ended up being recognizing, or at least telling that, okay, I was maybe committing a mistake when it comes to talking about designs and other different crafts. This is where I led to start to read more about decolonizing design and critically looking into what it could be design and how we should recognize traditional practices. Right? So to me, decolonizing design, like for instance, if you talk about decolonizing education, in the academia itself, what you're trying to do is you try to decolonize, or whatever the Western things came into education, you try to rethink alternatively. But for me, it's a different argument I like to put forward. So when it comes to design decolonization, it's a tricky one, because design itself is built within a different value system that inherently linked with what we recognize as Western thinking. So for me, when you mistakenly recognize that we can purify colonization from design, I feel like you propose to decolonize England, right? So it's kind of a contradiction, right? So we try to decolonize things from England, but we cannot decolonize England, or let's say Britain, right? Something like that. So for me, decolonizing design is about consciously using design so we not confuse other things or superimpose design into different value systems and therefore reducing the complexity of these systems. So that is for me the decolonizing design part. So when you do that, it's not stop you from accessing traditional communities. It's not stopping you learning from traditional communities. It's not stopping you from researching about traditional communities. But you started to do it in a diplomatic manner. So you know you are stepping from design reality into a total new reality. So you are not trying to conquer it. The word itself, diplomacy, is really nice word for me, because the word, within the word itself, it recognizes there are two parties and we are inherently different, and we need to deal with the two parties in a compromised manner. So it could happen similar manner. So if you started to realize, okay, design is one territory, nature is another territory. So when I'm looking at the bird's nest, or when I'm looking at the kingfisher's net, I'm moving into a different reality other than the design's reality. So I'll be very cautious, diplomatic, when I'm bringing things back to the design reality. So that is about my journey towards why I started to think about decolonization. And I just wanted to ask, with your 5 words, or let's say whatever in your design or design enthusiast life, Have you committed any category mistakes? We can discuss. Oh, perhaps you can counter, no, I'm in a different paradigm that I would ready to learn more. Right, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think that really brought us to where we want to start our conversation on new ways of design. So I think we're also, we don't have a lot of time for questions, but we'll have like maybe 1 or 2 questions for each of the panel members. And if you do want to ask any questions, please feel free to just jump right in if you want to have anything to ask from our panelists. Can I invite Sophia, Dilina, and Sanskar to please come up? Alright, so I think we've had some very interesting intros and of the diversity of thought and the diversity of talent and different areas that all of you are in education, industry, art, etc. I want to start by asking a question from Sophia because I went through the about part in your Barefoot website when I wanted to do some research. And I saw that Barefoot story. Your grandma actually started with a group of women weavers in a convent workshop, right? And their design was not really something that was taught formally, right? It was design that came through making and from learning from each other. Your grandma working with these women weavers. I wanted to just know your thoughts on how and what this would actually tell about where design knowledge comes from, particularly also from your perspective as working in design and strategy in Barefoot today.
Thank you. Well, I think Barefoot's a big fan of University of Morogoro. We have about 4 designers who are graduates from your wonderful university and 3 from integrated design department. And I think when it comes to how we design, there's something my grandmother set an example and it's always kind of stuck with me. And she kind of references it to it. This goes through all from our pearl winders to our weavers to our dyers to our cutters. But she talks about a conductor in an orchestra. For example, if you're a conductor in the orchestra, you bring people together and you kind of create, or you kind of direct them to create music, but you may not be able to know how to play every single instrument. And I think there are weavers. I think the way that design plays a role at Barefoot is that we just understand that we just want to create something that would last. And I think just having that focus is just to create something beautiful and just create something that lasts. I think that's kind of the role that design tries to play. And we have 3 weaving centers that are still managed with us to this day. So the convent in which we started is just north of Colombo, not too far. And I think that principle in itself has been very sustaining. And I think how we all come together is that there are starting points. I think we just work together and that itself is a design. You're wondering what is design? Is this stone a design? I think is the way that we work and function, is that a design?
Yeah, I love that example of the orchestra as well, and I think it's a platform for us to reimagine how we look at design and what we know is design or how we define design, etc. It's really interesting and thought-provoking. With that, I'm going to turn into Dilina. It's one thing I wanted to ask him because we work a lot with curriculum design, so because we work in curriculum design, we looked at the design curriculums across the design schools all over the world, I would say, and in Lanka as well. You did talk about decolonization, and it was really interesting your thoughts on decolonization as well. But if we wanted to, in education, in design education, in university, if we wanted to decolonize design education, right? If you want to contradict that statement, you can do that also. But if we did want to decolonize design education, where should we start? Is it curriculums, the different methods, the way we assess students? You also look at different ways of assessing students as well. Or is it also could be the very definition of design itself, right? And across your work and your research and your teaching, how do you kind of bring these conversations to life in your classrooms?
Thank you for the question. So, if I look back to my practices, I started in a very small manner. The same module of history of art and design. I slightly changed the narrative. Instead of claiming that everything is design, I started with historically claiming this is how the Latin term design started. And then I exposed them to different types of design, such as I read a nice book called Just Enough Design from Japan. This work talked about Odo philosophy, and it's about not fine-tuning products. So for instance, what I always do within that module is, instead of providing a universal narrative, I try to cognitively prepare students so that they know okay, there are multiple different ways of design. So it's not a one way as opposed to the others, but there could be different ones. We could even learn from different cultures as far as you do it in a diplomatic manner instead of calling out practices. For instance, I read a nice paper where a Mexican set of researchers doing on decolonization, where they try to understand how knitting works as a relational care. So we are not doing, for instance, knitting we do not for solve problem, but not for do efficiency, but for the sake of caring, sign of care. So how we can learn from that and change design instead of telling that it is design. So we could understand that diversity. So I would say the first step is, even within a small module, you could expose students to the idea that there are multiple narratives and each has a different potential.
Yeah, I do feel opening up thought processes to accepting different perspectives in whichever the field that we are talking about would be really a blessing in terms of really understanding people, and where empathy comes to play a huge part in terms of really understanding that different people will have different perspectives, and that is okay, right? There could be good and wrong, but from that person's perspective, it could be something else to think about. So that's also a really interesting way of looking at new ways of design. I want to turn to Sanskar because I saw some beautiful work that you've done. And one of the common things that I noticed across all of your work is that you really look at the context before you start your work, and you try to incorporate different elements of the community or the context or nature of where you do your work into the work that we do, whether it's a wall art, whether it's installation, whether it's street art, whether it's a spatial experience, right? And you do it in very informal and very unexpected places as well. So how does working, within these very unconventional spaces, not the traditional design spaces, but very unconventional spaces that you've done, really help you to break away from this Western textbook perspective or idea of what design should be?
I mean, it's a problem that I face, which I converted into a solution, which is I can't start drawing without a brief. Like when I was in art school, I was trying to understand what is my style, where all the other students were trying to, by the final year I'll have this mascot to myself. By the final year I'll have this font that will be my font. And I was like, I don't have a color scheme, I don't have a font, I don't have mascot, illustration style, and which sort of like played with me throughout those 4 years. But then later when I started exploring different mediums, and some brands started trusting me, okay, you've done something like this, you've done an X, can you do a Y? And I'm like, okay, I don't know X and Y are close to each other, or what did you see? Like, what is the binding to them? And after graduating from an art college, I realized my journey went on from drawing on canvas to drawing on paper to painting on canvas to painting an interior wall to an exterior wall to designing fabrics, designing people in front of it, or like just art directing which angles to shoot this video from. So I understood that it doesn't have like one thing that I'm really curious about, which brings get to, it has to feel like a wallpaper. It can't feel like I have a message for you. So that if it's a wallpaper, I'll sit there for longer. I'll have one more coffee, eventually make the bill bigger. If it's a community space where people are already just running around, there's no viewing distance to it, I won't paint the big part. So I started like finding these cues which were sort of problem solving in some sense for me, but not for, I don't know if it actually made an impact in the world, but like for me it was solving some problems that, okay, this wall deserves this sort of an artwork and a commercial space deserves some other style, and which gave me an opportunity to explore what all I can check. And I mean, that actually works for me because now I know I won't retire soon, because I will keep challenging myself and I'll ask questions that come up with new designs. Again, because in the morning in my slide I had my initial slide which said I started drawing before the internet. So I wasn't distracted. I didn't have cues. I didn't have Pinterest to go and check where I must start from. So maybe I'm just experimenting with things which, because I am from South Asia, my art was all over South Asia. So I didn't actually put in a lot of design thought to it, but
those inspirations you get from the context of the communities itself. Really nice, thank you. We do have, I think, maybe one round of questions. So there are some really interesting questions. I'll cut down on that. But to Sophia, I feel like backwards philosophy is almost timeless, right? But in a challenging time, you're working in design and strategy in this very fast-paced, digital-driven world that we are part of right now. And we see this big trend of hyper-consumerism, people and brands just pushing towards buying things we don't really need, right? And in such a time, I really do feel like, after listening to you and your initial presentation also, that it is time for us to kind of pause a little bit, right? Just to take a step back, to love a little bit more, to empathize a little bit more, to be a little bit more kinder towards, that other person next to you. But then again, we are in a very challenging time, right? There's a lot of competition around us, and you are a part of strategy as well. You have to think about that as well. But in this sense, and also in keeping true to the philosophy of barefoot, in being timeless and in being with that beautiful philosophy that you do follow, how do you find new ways of design for barefoot?
Actually, I'm gonna, it's very rude, I'm gonna pull up my phone because Nella and I was just discussing this earlier, sorry, I name dropped her. But we were just talking about how barefoot has an identity that doesn't change depending on what's currently popular. We try not to make any conscious decisions to redefine ourselves based on fashion trends, and any change in the way we work comes about naturally over time. And what I would touch on about that is we don't even like labeling our items. Sometimes even coming up with like a description to something, we just feels a bit silly because we're like, you could do whatever you want with it. And like we get consumers come around and they're like, oh, can I like wear this as something? I mean, of course you can do whatever you like. And I think, I don't know why we try to box ourselves or like have one thing serve one purpose. I think how we try to approach design is we just, again, I keep going back to trying to keep something that lasts. And people would come to barefoot and they'd just be like, oh, it's a bit expensive, okay? Which is, I understand, but what we try to have or try to talk to consumers about is when you buy that one thing, we wouldn't want you to come back again. We would want you to have that one thing for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. We still get people who message us with a photo of like an old toy, an old mouse. Sometimes what we might do is if the mouse is looking a bit tattered and needs a new clothes, we will definitely get the mouse new clothes. But I think it's just something that you want to take away and love and just own. And that's how I see design. And we're very fortunate enough to be completely manage ourselves through and through. And I think an example I will bring as to why hands-on design is so sustainable was actually during COVID. We managed to keep production going because the only sources that we needed externally were dye blocks and yarn. But everything else is, guess what? We can set a beam up at people's houses, and that's how we started. You could eat from home. You could sew from home. And just to be able, when we had the fuel crisis, we had a facility to use firewood to continue our dye baths and just keep water. I think just keeping things simple and keeping that this origin comes from such a lovely country. I mean, South Asia is just so rich. The whole world, we're like a beautiful trade route country. We learn so much. And I think keeping those alive and going is the need. I think we don't need to really look west for inspiration. Like even the whole concept of a factory line, I think is terrible. So one thing about barefoot is each toy is made from someone from start to finish. There's not just one person doing ears and one person doing eyes or whatever it is. And yeah, I don't know. I think we can just look more inward than outward.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's really how I actually wanted to kind of bring this forum to a close. It's amazing. In terms of, I don't want to say sustainable, but it is, sustainable in a sense that it keeps coming back, it keeps coming back, being simple. But do we have time or, yeah, okay, so just a couple more questions, right? Okay, so Dilina, this is something I wanted to ask you because you describe design as something that mediates different relationships, whether it is between people, whether it's between different technologies, environments or more than human actors or whatever it is, right? And in the global south, here in South Asia, we have very complex, extremely complex socio-technical systems, right? We have different histories, different cultures, different religions, we have different politics, very different influences coming into play as well, right? So one of the interesting dialogues that you brought forth in your presentation as well was this, the idea that design can act as a form of diplomacy, which can create dialogues, which can create negotiations, and which can, carry very shared meanings and discussions between each of us. So how do you see this diplomacy and creating of dialogue playing out in real projects and even in terms of education and teaching as well?
Yeah, as I was explaining before, the word diplomacy is a really beautiful one, loaded pack. So it says there are two sides, and it says we are different, and it also says that we're gonna deal in a very peaceful manner between the two parties, or more than two parties. So there is a rising domain, a multidisciplinary domain that's happening at the cross-section of sociology, information design, and bit of science and technology studies. That I was also mentioning in the morning, that they try to do is like use design as a way of communicating between those different worlds. So for instance, okay, let's take one of examples from one of my research. I've been research at a very isolated village in Knuckles area. Maybe if you are a hiker, you have been there. It's isolated and you have to walk in the jungle for like 6 kilometers in order to reach that village. That's properly isolated. So when it comes to their belief systems, they worship the mountain, and like whenever they are doing a chain cultivation, they have a lot of non-human negotiations with gods, with mountains and everything. So one way, if we tell that okay, this act is more of a scientific reason because they are using these leaves in order to chase animals because it has this scientific component, that means you are confusing the categoristics. You are superimposing the science into their belief system. So in their design could come into play the diplomatic role. So you could explain without flattering that complexity. Okay, this is what they believe. This is their complex world. So you could look into that complex picture and decide what you're going to take. So that is why I'm keeping like promoting diplomacy or with design. So you could communicate with between those different plural words.
Really, really interesting and a lot for us to think about in that sense as well. Before we go into any questions from the audience, I just wanted to ask Sanskar, your work with the public art, the festivals, and the Homework Studio in Dubai, right? You work a lot with the communities. You showed some of your work that carried the kids playing Ludo into the artwork that you have done, right? So what do these public, very community-facing, very public projects teach you about new ways of design? Maybe when you reflect back later on, after maybe a few months, after one of your projects, what do these kind of get back to you in terms of reflections in new ways of design?
I feel as designers or any practitioner, we sort of like want to complain, oh, I did my part but these guys didn't react well. It wasn't meant to do what it did. And to that, my answer is, I'm calling me thinking of a brief as a problem. But I have a feeling that everyone should have that problem. Everyone should work towards a brief. If we don't let the South Asian people feel that South Asian design exists, how are we gonna even talk about the topic? We as designers, we are trying to solve a problem. This is the problem. If we work with the communities, we work with all age groups. We train them to see certain colors, certain forms, certain shapes, as kids and as students, everyone. So I feel if it is making an impact to the people who are living around that space, we don't need to shy away from calling ourselves as designers in the world industry standards or whatever. We don't have to feel small against anything. I feel
How do you kind of reflect back on your projects after a few months' time in terms of how they communicate with the communities, interact with your work?
right. So that's what, I don't want them to feel I don't want that alien feeling in them where they're like, okay, I'm not comfortable with this wall, or I want to paint this wall again. Most of the times they start calling it as a landmark. If they want to tell someone where I live with this.
Becomes part of it.
No longer it becomes, earlier it was like, oh, take a left from the temple, but now it's like this wall. Come to this wall, exactly.
Nice. That's really interesting. Before we close up, yes.
Thank you very much for this really, really insightful discussion about design. I'm loud enough for this. So, as somebody who's really motivated to design a menswear line, right? Like clothes, right? Slow fashion. My question relates to the kind of things that I think about. For example, slow fashion, not having plastics in my material because recently of this polyester causing infertility, things like chemical dyes and the kind of things that how effects that it has in the kind of nature. Now with ignorance is bliss, right? And now that we have this kind of knowledge, as designers, I'm back then when I was like, I have this idea for a menswear, so it's awesome. But then when I told it to my partner, she's like, oh, did you think about this? Did you think about who's stitching this? Did you think about the chemicals? So then, as designers, right, how do we kind of navigate that thing? I'd love advice from all three of you all in that kind of space. I hope I was clear what I was trying to ask.
I think Sophia would be a good start in terms of, as a fashion.
I'm distracted.
I don't know, I feel like sometimes it's an idea. Again, barefoot is over 60 years in the making. It started off very small. It started off at home. It started off with getting your allotment of yarn from the depot during one of the country's worst financial times in history. I think just look 2 steps ahead. It's very intimidating to you have this end vision, right? You have your end point vision. I think also give yourself a chance to relax. You can't be perfect also all the time. But I think there's a lot of incredible work you can do at a very small scale just next to you. I think it's also just, I think it's great that you have that value so strongly. And I think a strong value not deviating from it is already a great starting point. I think I don't know if that answers your question. But yeah, I think yeah.
My point is more around the kind of guilt of that is like what I'm trying to understand. It's not the kind of lack of motivation to do it. Like I think that's there, but how do we kind of navigate that guilt? Like we know
Nowadays, working with brands, I realized sustainability is just a standard. Like in the sense, it's just a tick mark that they want, that we are vegan or we don't use chemicals. There are brands who give us old denims and tell us, okay, can you make a collage out of this? But you're wasting your denim. It's already been made. So it's like a full circle that if you keep asking questions, you can ask a lot of questions. So you have to settle somewhere and just curb that guilt. Okay, I won't make a lot of mistakes, I'll make little mistakes.
No, he doesn't want to get into fashion. Any more questions? Yes.
Sorry, the lady from Barefoot, you have a challenge in recruiting the newer people and the hand groups, and if so, are you able to maybe transfer to another region where maybe there are people to be recruited? I mean, how do you see this down the road?
Yes, that's something that we're definitely struggling with. Like we do 100% handloom, but the average age of our team would be about in their 50s. So I think what we try to do is just look just around. So Barefoot's philosophy is we don't bring women to work, we take work to women. So we're actively trying to go to places where we are needed and where we need work. So that is happening. And yeah, I think it's also just, when I think about the West, again, this Western culture, it's incredible how many people are happier to maybe work in a factory line, in white, I'm not going to say that because we're saying, but like, but I think, I don't know, it's just also just to kind of say what we do is cool and just take ownership of that and have people be proud to be proud to join something like of this sort of enterprise. But yeah, we're doing that as often as we can.
Yeah, great. I think we're gonna have to wrap up. We have just one more question. Quick one. Yeah, maybe one more. Yeah. Okay.
Actually, to answer the question, what's the difference between the Japanese slipper and the other one, the rubber slipper? I think the Japanese slipper basically evolved over generations of time, where the rubber slipper basically was designed to imitate the Japanese slipper to mass produce it and make a profit. So I think that's it. And if you take nature evolved, so the kingfisher basically evolved, it was not designed at all. So that got made by lots of mistakes over many billions of generations and then operated now.
Yeah, I totally agree with it. Like, so for instance, like if I add a little bit on the Japanese culture and everything, there is a way of living, like what is right, what is valued as good, whether it's relaxing or whether it's making profit, whether it's being progress or whether it's laid back, everything is really different. So every time you see those things, if you started to understand the difference, that is where you could start to work with designs in a more diplomatic manner. Yes, I totally agree.
Thank you so much. I think that was a very, very insightful conversation. We're going to wrap it up with that. And there's a lot of takeaways from each and every one of you from very different perspectives. And one thing I think I want to close off is that it's good to slow down, right? Take a look around us and to be grateful and to think from multiple perspectives and to think along with our communities and build that dialogue and to act with a lot of diplomacy, as Dilina says. So thank you so much. we're going to close off for today because we have another session coming up. Thank you very much for the interesting questions. I wish there was more time for more questions, but thank you so much to each of you for being here with us, Dilina, Sanskar and Sophia. It was amazing. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.